Hello everyone, I'm Dick Tango. Today we're going to be talking about the VLK and Holo optics and how being on PC or console or running a higher or lower FOV or running independent or affected ADS FOV may affect your choice with these optics. Quick recap, just in case you all don't know, I'll go over what the different FOV settings are, as well as the different ADS FOV settings that's independent or affected. FOV means field of view. It's going to be how wide the image that you see on the screen is, but also kind of how zoomed in it is. And then the difference between independent and affected is if you're on independent, no matter what your FOV is, you return to the default 80 FOV when you ADS or aim down sight. And if you're on affected, you maintain whatever your FOV slider is set at. On console, there is no FOV slider, though they did have that in the Cold War beta, so hopefully the next big update that brings all the Cold War content into Warzone will bring that to console players, because it is a fairly notable advantage to be able to change the FOV slider. So I'm going to go ahead and compare first the 120 and 80 FOV, or the console FOV default, to the maximum FOV you can put on PC. As you can see here, on 120 FOV, you get all the way out here past this warning sticker, the doors, the little H corner of the building, and then the wall to the crate on the left side. And then on the right, you get the text here, 6 HIG, and just after the G it cuts off, there's this pole here, and then a little bit of space with where the doors meet there. And if you look at the top, it goes well above the crane here, all the way into the sky, all about right here to where the gutter meets the rooftop, and it'll go all the way down a good bit past this crack. If you switch down to 80 FOV, you're losing the corner, the doors, all of that on the left. You're losing most of the sky here. You don't even see the gutter where it meets the roof, but you lose the roof quite a bit further up. Barely goes up past this crane or whatever that is, and you lose all of the text and that bar on the left, and you just see where the doors meet. And then on the right, you get a little past this crack, which is not the same one. See where the grass here? Grass is all the way up here. So as you can tell, the difference between 80 and 120 FOV is quite huge. When looking at the 80 FOV, on the 120, it goes basically from about here, down here, across, and about up here. So a very, very small picture comparatively. Then I'm going to cover the ADS settings. So when you're running 120 FOV and affected, that means that when you're ADS'd, you're going to get the 120 FOV still, but it's going to zoom depending on the optic you're using. No optic's going to be no zoom. Holos are about 1.5, and then the Scout class, like the VLK, the Scout, and the Cronin 480 are all going to be 3.5-ish. There's also, of course, the sniper optics that are going to zoom more, and a few others in between. So as you can see, 120 FOV on affected, you're going to have a fairly small image of this like water crate here with pallets under it. You get some of the crate on the left, and then the 2 bars here on the right. If you go into independent, which is the equivalent of 80 FOV as well, on affected or independent, which I'll show you in a minute, you lose out on that bar there and the whole crate. You're just a little bit past. You've got a few of these little ridges in the shipping container, and then the 1 bar here. And if I switch over to affected at 80 FOV, or basically what the consoles use, as you can see, you get 3 of these ridges on the left past that vent, as well as the bar and a little more here, so basically identical, and the object in the middle is the same size. And then 80 independent, it's exactly the same. That proves that it's kind of all the same there, and if you were to compare this to the console, it shows up exactly the same as that as well. Next, we're going to look at how the optics compare. So this is the holographic optic. The Corp Combat Holo is the specific one I'm using. You could do the same with the PBX Holo 7. And as you can see, is a very, very small image of the object. You get the whole crate on that side and a little past that second bar on the right. If you go into a VLK with a greater zoom, you lose a lot of the crate there, as well as you get closer to the bar on the right here, and then the image gets a lot bigger of the target here comparatively. And then if you go into FOV 80 with the Holo sight, or independent or console, you get a very similar actually size view of your target here in the center, but you do lose out on some of that crate there and that second bar on the right, so you're going to have less around you. And then if you go over to a VLK with 80 affected or independent or on a console, you're going to get none of the crate. You're going to get only 3 of these to the left of the vent, as opposed to I think like 6 or 7 on that side. Yeah, as you can see, you lose a lot of this here as well. You lose the WY as it zooms in. You get a much tighter picture overall, and the higher zoom means you have the bigger object. What I'm going to compare next is why you may want to choose one optic over another depending on whether or not you're on console, or you're using independent, or you're using an 80 FOV or lower FOV. As you can see here, I've got a recoil plot. This was this Ram 7, 30 rounds is what I shot here. This recoil plot, when we're running an 80 FOV or independent or on a console, is about the size of the whole optic here. If we switch it to 120 field of view unaffected, that same exact recoil pattern, I didn't reshoot or anything, it's literally the same recoil pattern, is much, much smaller than the optic. Since the amount of zoom or your field of view actually determines how much you'll need to move the mouse or how much you need to push down on the stick to account for recoil, you'll actually have to move your mouse or your stick less to do the same recoil control when you're using a higher FOV on affected than if you're using the lower FOV or on a console or using independent. So if you are using, if you're on PC, consider this less recoil control that you have to do manually. What you lose out on, though, is if we go back here, is the size of the picture of the target you're looking at. As you can see, it gets a lot bigger going from 80 affected, or sorry, 80 or independent or on a console to all the way up to 120. Your target gets a bit smaller, as that shows here too. The target's going to be a lot smaller, which means that your tracking your left to right and where you're hitting on the body needs to be much more precise. So this is something to try back and forth and see what you prefer. Using an in-between FOV with affected is another option as well, to give you an overall more zoomed picture than 120 affected, but not as zoomed as using independent or 80 FOV. And then what I want to compare here is how very similar the recoil pattern also is when you're looking at the 80 FOV on the Holo optic compared to the 120 affected FOV on the VLK. I actually went and measured this pixel-wise, and it's maybe 15 or so, 12 to 15 pixels taller, this recoil plot. Again, the same exact one when you're looking at it through the Holo on 80 FOV independent compared to the VLK at 120 FOV affected, which is like 1.3% or something. Very, very, very small difference at 1080p here. Tiny difference. So something that you might consider is, if you are a console player or if you prefer a lower FOV or independent, you may want to start running the holographic optics because the greater zoom is less necessary for you. Whereas if you're running 120 FOV and affected, definitely be running these VLKs, because you still get this wider image on the left and the right. As you can see almost the whole forklift here. You can see the WYNN on the box. But if you're on 80 FOV, even with a lower zoom, you can barely see this crate here. You can only see part of the forklift on the right. So you're going to still get a much greater overall picture, but your target's going to be much tighter if you use the VLK versus the Holo. And you still get that greater peripheral vision, so you know what's going on around you. Really, I think the ideal setup is this. This is what I use. I use VLKs on my long-range weapons almost exclusively. You could use, say, the Scout or the Cronin, but I just like the default reticle for the VLK here the best. And you could also go to a different holographic site, but I think that the shape of the Corp Combat Holo is the best. But yeah, basically, if you have a PC, you get to try 120 or 110 even. I think that a lot of people think that 120 is just a little too kind of fisheye, makes you maybe a little motion sick when you're running. But yeah, 120 or 110, use affected. You get a much wider picture when you're aiming down sights. But if you use a VLK, you still get a pretty tight view of your target. And if you were used to running VLKs and you were running 80 or independent, then you're going to have an easier time controlling your recoil. And then if you're on console, or if you prefer the smaller FOV or independent, give your holos a try, because you're going to have a greater peripheral vision, as well as less recoil control to do compared to a VLK. So that's basically the gist of it here. Just wanted to kind of give you some ideas about why you may want to choose the VLK versus the Holo, depending on your situation, as well as some information about what to choose for your FOV settings. If you liked the video, please give it a like or a comment. If you haven't already, please subscribe. I've got more great content coming. And I do stream over on Twitch. Got affiliate last week. It's been going great. Be sure to check it out. As you can see, it's right up in the corner. And just give it a shot. See what you like. Keep this information in mind to make your decisions. And have a great day.